as Dara was concerned, any deviation from the original plan was a mistake, and mistakes always came with consequences. Still, she always made allowances for the unexpected, just in case. Getting out alive wouldn't be the hard part. Getting in had been the hard part. Dara lowered her head even further, painfully aware that she was one of very few women left in the streets. The rest had gathered up their children and sought the scant safety that their meager dwellings offered. Dara picked up her pace, trying to slide through the crowd without drawing attention to herself. She couldn't afford to stand out in this neighborhood. She was surrounded by people whose lives had been torn apart 4 times over, first by invasion, then by sectarian violence, then by flight from their homeland, and now by the impoverished limbo of their refugee status. And there was no one they blamed more than the U.S. government. Had anyone guessed who Dara was, who she represented, she would have been torn apart by the angry mob. She wasn't frightened so much as she was just aware. The danger was simply a fact, a variable, to be recognized and respected. Finally, she recognized the makeshift storefront from the satellite imagery. Her target. The front door was locked, but she had expected that. There was a small street-level window on the back alley side of the building, just big enough for her to climb through. Barely. As she lowered herself into the darkened building, she whispered a small word of ironic thanks that she was still gaunt after her most recent bout of intestinal parasites. This time compliments of an undercooked ceremonial dinner with a Sudanese tribal chief. Ah, giardia. The gift that keeps on giving. 5 pounds heavier, and she wouldn't have fit. She relaxed as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. The layout of the room was just as her source had described. Hopefully, his description of where the data was hidden would be equally accurate. Dara could be in and out in less than a minute, exactly the way she liked to conduct operations. Particularly operations that required walking into neighborhoods full of people who would very much like to see her dead. But just as she was about to sweep aside the carpet to look for the hidden floor compartment that her source had described, she heard the doorknob rattle. She froze in place, her right hand automatically reaching for her gun. She hoped that the flimsy lock would deter whoever it was, since there was nowhere to hide in the small room. No such luck. She stepped behind a small table in the corner of the room as she heard the unwelcome sound of a key turning in the lock. It wasn't big enough to hide behind, but at least it offered a margin of cover. The dark-haired man who slipped in obviously expected the room to be empty. He didn't even bother to look around as he quietly pulled the door closed behind him. His eyes were still adjusting to the dim light when Dara spoke, and he whirled around when he heard her voice. "You had a goddamn key?" His hand jumped for his weapon, but he stopped himself as Dara yanked the veil off of her head. He at least had the courtesy to look embarrassed as he recognized her. Dara's eyes narrowed as she stared at Tariq Bataina, the very same officer from Jordan's General Intelligence Directorate who had ordered her to stand down on all operations in Iraqi refugee sectors. He had stubbornly refused her request to reconsider, even when she explained just how critical the data she was after was. He hadn't seemed to care that there were lives at stake. And yet, here he was. "This was my operation, damn it. My source, my information, my op. I only told your service about it as a courtesy and to make sure that your people wouldn't get in the way." Dara's voice came out as a hiss. She wanted to yell, but she couldn't risk attracting attention from outside. He didn't respond. His eyes were too busy scanning the room, looking for the same computer drive that Dara was after. She smirked. At least she'd known better than to divulge all of her source's information. Only she knew the exact location where the data storage device was hidden. She was figuring out how to grab the thumb drive and get out quickly when the gunshots started. Dara and her unwelcome companion both instinctually dropped to a crouch. Fortunately, the store's front windows had long since been boarded up, either because the owner hadn't wanted prying eyes to see what was going on inside, or because the glass had been broken in previous neighborhood skirmishes. Unfortunately, it